Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk About It.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you so much. And for anybody who's curious, we were very, very close, and I appreciate the effort there. Good evening, everyone. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm very, very happy that we're having this conversation. So I have my laptop in front of me, not because I'm multitasking, but because I wanted to pull up the last letter that the city sent up to State Highway to support Councilmember Watson's comment. The last transportation list that we sent to State Highway was sent on August 28th, and two things stood out in particular for this discussion that I'm just going to read very briefly. Priority number 2, US 301 MD 197. Project planning was completed in 2007, and the project is ready to move into design and construction. Development pressures continue to mount in this area, including mixed-use development at Mill Branch Crossing project, and a regional recreational park being planned by the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. This intersection provides access to many Bowie businesses and is at the heart of the city's downtown. As noted during the project planning study, increasing traffic volume will also create a permanent congestion bottleneck in the regional road network and potentially harm the local economy unless the interchange project moves forward. Improvements are needed to accommodate the existing and projected high volumes of traffic generated by continuous growth along US 301 corridor and to address existing traffic safety problems. Unfortunately, this critical project has been lingering on hold since 2007 for a lack of funding. Traffic volume in 2022 was 64,200 average vehicles per day on US 301. On MD 197, projected traffic volume for the year 2042 is 75,600 vehicles per day on US 301. The amount of traffic congestion and the substantial amount of approved additional development in the corridor accentuates access and safety concerns. Since it is likely the ultimate controlled access improvement planned for US 301 will not occur for many years into the future, the existing roadway should be widened from 3 lanes in each direction as soon as possible in order to keep pace with other road improvement projects slated for construction north and south of this segment. If a separate project planning study is not possible, we would respectfully request that a study be funded at the district level. And so to answer your question in terms of what's in our capacity, that was the most recent letter that this city council sent to State Highway to advocate for the widening of 301. And I know Mr. Minor's here, he can speak a little bit more to that. But in our capacity, this is what we do. We work with our county elected officials, our state elected officials. They are all CC'd on this letter and send this to State Highway to amplify your concerns, amplify your priorities to make sure that we are keeping that top of mind and we're continuing to advocate for the needs of our community. So just so you know, that was the last letter that was sent on August 28th. This is all public information that can be found on the city's website, so you understand as council members what our role is, and ultimately not only jurisdiction, but making sure that we are making the request and the direct asks and the recommendations that are needed for our community to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've been said that we might want to go to our state delegate, the Honorable Margaret Holmes. Do you want to comment on that, Mr. Holmes?
Thank you. I first off need to apologize for my discretion. I received an email that my mother's been rushed to the hospital, so I'm a little bit distracted. And I apologize. That's why I got up a little while ago and I'm trying to figure what's going on here. In reference to the traffic in 301 specifically, it has been spoken to about with Mayor Adams. We had significant funding that we put in place way back when Senator Doug Peters was here involved. The problem that we have is that we, 23rd District, we are in competition with other jurisdictions within Prince George's County. When the requests go up, it does not go up from it goes up from 23rd District to Prince George's County to the state. And sometimes we are fighting with other jurisdictions for funding. And to give you one of the examples that I was instrumental in getting done, doesn't apply to us, but done in 210. When the request for speed cameras came in from 210, I circumvented the funding from going to the general fund of the state highway and made it clear that the funding that was coming from speeding tickets, etc., went to redesigning of the highway, which would hopefully decrease the traffic there. We, in 197 corridor, 301 corridor, there is a significant amount of need for that area as well. And one of the things that we all need to take a look at, city level, county level, and state level. When a developer comes through to propose a subdivision in Prince George's County, no matter what level it is, we need to make sure that that developer puts roadway systems in place prior to the issuance of building permits. That's the way it used to be done, and that's the way it should be done. Prior to the issuance of building permits, the roadway construction must be started. Prior to the issuance of bonds, etc. Now, in 301, for example, most people don't know, but the rights of way for 301 have already been established to the point where, a little known fact, all of you are familiar with Rip's Restaurant. Rip's is within State Highway right away. Okay? Doesn't mean that the State Highway is going to take it anytime soon. But it does mean that the State Highway and the state has looked at what road widening needs to take place in the future. Now, I applaud Bill Chesley, Mill Branch, because I know that Bill Chesley has put funding in place for the widening of roadways, for his construction there. I don't know about the other projects. And I have to admit, some of the things that we're talking about in terms of construction projects, I have taken a step back from them. I don't really know about a lot of them because zoning is not a criteria that I, as a state delegate, have control over. I see the signs like you do. I have other things on my plate, HOA issues, county, etc. on my plate. So when the developments take place, what we need to do is to make sure that the developers put those roadways in place prior to the issuance of permits. I will look at, again, the priority funding for state, and I will look at also at that letter from August 28th that Mayor Pro Tem has talked about, to see if that letter addresses any priorities, etc. And if you don't mind,
Go, yes. Yes, please. Prayers for your mom and you. Yeah. May I go next? Okay?
All right.
If I were to go next, is it okay?
And is that Kim?
It is Kim.
Okay, Mrs. Honorable Taylor, the delegate.
Thank
State
you.
delegate, yes.
Thank you. And I'll, Marvin, what he can do, I can do. But some of the things that I have taken away from this is, number one, I'm going to look for this letter, as I don't recall seeing it. But thank you for that. and it sounded like it was very comprehensive and exactly the language that we need, so I appreciate that.
I just forwarded to you now.
Oh, thank you. And the Anne Arundel County delegation approached Adrian and I, actually during our freshman tour, a freshman outing recently, about 301, because you know it's not just a problem for us, it's a problem for Anne Arundel County and potentially Charles County as well. Definitely Charles, okay. So what I'm thinking is that with this partnership between the counties, we might be able to strengthen our request and add muscle to it, and hopefully be able to go to State Highway and hopefully elevate the priority of 301 on their list. And then, Mr. Scott, can you answer something for me? You mentioned that there was an opportunity potentially for a developer improvement plan that might circumvent the priority process. Did I hear you say that, or is that a way maybe we can go at this differently than waiting for it to get on the
Not certain, but if a developer wanted to come in and bring development, whether it's residential, mixed use, or business, and if the existing road network couldn't support, the amount of traffic that it would generate, then if there was no state project or county or municipal projects to address it, then the developer is on his own to come up with the road network to handle the traffic, and so that's an option that they have. But they would have to go through the public hearing, process in order for it to come through.
And apparently, this is what Chesley has done with Mill Branch. He has this, but he's taken his own money apparently to fund the improvements at several intersections, but he's asking for the money back in the form of a TIF, where the incremental revenue achieved from the development would go back to him to repay for the loan that essentially he's given himself to do this. So is that right?
No.
Is that not what he said at the meeting the other night?
He's asking for part of the money, not
Just-
the entire thing.
Oh, just part of it?
The total
Okay.
improvement cost is about, let me pull up the exact number, but it's around
7.2
16 million.
Okay.
Yeah, just 16.
So I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware that, even though the Mill Branch project, the developer has offered to come out of his own pocket, but he's gonna get some of that back, which is okay. I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad or good thing. It's just part of the arrangement, or he's requesting a TIF in that case. But I have another idea is, the feds have a whole lot of infrastructure funding, right? Biden talks a lot about all of the monies that, to go towards improving bridges and roads. I would think that we could go to our federal partners, our congressmen and senators, and ask them to also look at 301 as a priority for some of the infrastructure money that's out there. So I think that's all on my list. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was very helpful. I like the interchange or the exchange that's going across the various stakeholders on the panel there. Appreciate that. What I did want to say is, what I'm hearing is there's lots of requests that are being made or should be made, right? I wanted to just talk about a concept that I think is in the purview of some of the elected officials on the various councils that they sit on, and that is the relationship between development and traffic. And so there's always this sort of, I call it dog chasing its tail concept, where I think clearly there is a relationship. The more development you have, the more traffic you have, right? And then the more money you need to widen roads to reduce that. And the question I have is, can the people who haven't spoken yet maybe comment on what they see that balance being? How do you balance the need for, say, tax revenues and additional, say, residential units to sort of broaden that tax base against the traffic that results from it. Is it a chicken and the egg thing? How do you break this dog chasing its tail cycle? It's in that regard, thank you. That's a hard one.
It kind of is because, like, as we said, Senator Peters, I don't remember that, but I heard tonight that Senator Peters some years ago, I guess, anticipated this volume of traffic and asked for a widening of the road. It just didn't happen. So, right, I mean, you're right, I'm just stating a fact, but this is the problems we get into when there's multiple levels of enforcement and, who the requests are going to, and if there's money or not, and all of that. So, yeah, it's tough because we need retail establishments. We need corporations moving into Prince George's County so we can stop relying on our property taxes to fund everything. So we absolutely need these developments to happen, but they have to happen, like you said, they should happen in a more planned out way. But sometimes, I guess, and we see today that, county said it's the state, it's the city said, well, we told everybody, and I'm like, I didn't even know about it. So, these are kind of things this is why this is so important, right? I'm an HOA president too, so I really prefer to be in that seat than up here, asking these questions. But this is exactly why these kind of forums are important to bring us together. So we talk about these things all at once and we hear the same message, and then we can go after and say, oh, don't forget, that we have to remember to make sure 301 is on the priority list. So anyway, hope that answers your question.
We'd like to hear from Joe Miners, who works with planning and sustainability for the city of Bowie. So Joe, any comments from you?
Well, thank you. The questions that were asked, I think, are more appropriate to be answered by elected officials because you're asking what are they going to do about it. I'm a staff person. I work for the city's planning and sustainability department. I've been around Bowie as a planner since 1985, and so I have a pretty good perspective on the master planning process and how projects go through the funding cycles. One thing I wanted to say that may not be clear to everyone is that the area has grown according to the master plan that the county has set, has adopted. So it's not as if we've had major changes or unexpected things. These plans have been in place for years as far as the zoning, where we want the development to occur, what types of road systems would satisfy the needs. So from a long-range planning perspective, for example, Route 301 and Route 3 was intended to become a freeway, master plan freeway, like the Beltway. And the widening was to take place on the east side of 301. The west side, southbound lanes would become a two-way service road along the entire length. And that was the planning concept dating back to even to 1970. When you look at that over time, as developments have come in, they've had to provide right-of-way because it was on the master plan. They've had to dedicate land. Mr. Chesley's development is a good example. He's donated to the state 12 acres of his property along the frontage for future interchange at 301. So the area has grown according to the plan. There is also a test that's done when you approve a new master plan. You have to test your proposed land use against the proposed road network. And the plan can't be approved unless there is a positive finding. And in fact, the county executive has to make that analysis as part of the sign-off on the master plan process. Our master plan in Bowie was just approved in 2022, so we did go through that process. They did evaluate at the high level, the planning level, the land use scenario versus the transportation scenario, and found that it was in balance. In other words, if you could build out the road network as planned, it would satisfy the land uses that were recommended in the plan. One thing I wanted to mention, just as an example, and I'll stop talking, is Roxy had mentioned the interchange that the city is recommending at the intersection of 301 and 197. And that project was done about 20 years ago, the project planning for it. And what it would do is it would create a flyover ramp like you have down the Beltway and US 50. The traffic would fly over from northbound 301 over to 197. The interchange or the intersections at Harbor Way and Heritage Boulevard, Governor Bridge Road, those would all be completely separated from the main lines of US 301. And so you would separate the through traffic from the local traffic. It would help to bind both sides of 301 together in terms of community. But that project at that time, in 2005 or 2006, when it was going through project planning, the estimate of cost for it was over $300 million back then. So you can imagine what the cost would be now. That project hasn't gone into design and engineering yet, but we're recommending that the state fund it. But even if the design and engineering was done, who is going to come up with the equivalent of $300 million in today's dollars? When you think about that staggering investment that would have to be made by someone, there's not sure where you're going to find the money, honestly. And so I think it's something that you have to put into context. The other thing I was going to say is that when developments come through the subdivision process, they are evaluated against the county's adequate public facilities ordinance. The test is focusing on intersections, not on segments, what they call links of the roadway. The test is done at intersections. So you've had developers make incremental improvements, like Mr. Scott had mentioned. You can add a turn lane. Sometimes a road will start out with one left turn lane, they add a second left turn lane. Ultimately, you can add a third left turn lane, and you see this in like Northern Virginia and some very congested areas where there's 3 turn lanes. But after that, you can't do anymore. You have to separate the roads. You have to grade separate. So that's all part of the idea that was going to happen at 301, 197. But the test is on intersections. So all of the improvements you see developers making typically are making lane improvements, signal timing, adding a lane through an intersection to allow more traffic to pass through the intersection and then blend in. The Melford developers, another good example, they had their test, found the Route 450, Route 3 intersection was failing. They had to add a through lane in both directions to help the intersection to function so they could pass the county's test. They also made improvements at Governor Bridge Road. If you remember, that was only one lane. If you came out from the car dealerships, all the traffic had to come down in one lane, and it didn't matter if you were going straight or turning right, turning left. There's only one lane. So the Melford developer had to add lanes there, and they made the corresponding improvements on the Gateway Center side. So through the county subdivision ordinance, conditions are placed on developments which require the developer to make those improvements. They are tied to the issuance of permits or to that there's full guarantees that the project improvements have been bonded, that it's escalation for inflation if the construction doesn't happen immediately. So the county does the best they can through the subdivision ordinance, but that test is limited to intersections. So really the public sector needs to step in and look at the links in between. And that's why we have this capital program that the city writes its transportation letter about. We want the state to look at the entire length of 301 or the entire length of 197 because they're the only entity that can make those improvements, major investments. And so we go through that transportation priority list process that was described earlier. So that would be my illustration or my explanation of how it works from my perspective. And, you know, it really depends on whether you're looking at this at the macro planning level, or if you're looking at the subdivision developer level one by one, or if you're looking at it even as Councilmember Turner said, at the here and now, Watson, the here and now examples of picking up the trash or dealing with immediate issues. So it's at all levels. So it's a very complicated issue. And I think, you know, to be successful, you have to sort of figure out what wavelength you want to be on and then try to be as effective as you can and participate.
Mayor Pro Tem, and I think we'll go to January. McKay, if you have something to state from Vice Chair Bogate's officer, and then we'll go to the audience. Yeah, oh, the gentleman,
Yes.
And your name again is?
Clinton Truesdale. Clinton Truesdale, City Council member for District 3, I'm sorry. Yeah, I would just like to say that this forum right here, this town hall is very informative. And this is what we need. My constituents, I'm right on 301. I work on 301, I live on 301, so my constituents are very impacted by the development right there on 301. And as an elected official, just a local guy, it is important that I work and that we work with the county and the state. And one thing that was brought up in terms of, this particular project, Mill Branch, I believe it was started in 2007, and in terms of getting kind of in front of it, like by the time it gets to City Hall, it's kind of limited, so it's but so much we can do by ourselves, but I do appreciate the fact that we have people on the county and the state level that have an interest, as well as the residents of the city of Bowie. So.
So I will just chime in really briefly, because as I was listening, there were some thoughts that came to mind. Yesterday I met with the Chief Technology Advisor for the Office of Information Technology for Prince George's County, and our Prince George's County CIO, Wanda Gibson. And I also wanted to just kind of share with this audience some of the things that the county is thinking about and looking at. We are trying to look at ways on how we leverage technology to really get access to data in a more proactive way, so that we can armor some of these requests, so that our state highway and other officials, like on the federal level for some of the grants that we're thinking about going after, understand how traffic patterns are evolving in real time. There are a number of different grant opportunities that are available at the federal level that are funding different improvement projects for infrastructure. But in order for us to be in a more appropriate posture to aggressively go after those grants, we need better access to real-time data that's really telling the story of the evolution and the essential pressure that's being put on our roads, so that we can go after some of those grants more aggressively. So I do want this audience to know that is something that Prince George's County is thinking about and working on proactively. However, it just takes a little bit of time to get there, because some of these are more innovative technologies where they're not a standard practice, yes, across the board in different county areas. So I think that once we're able to essentially invest more in those areas, we'll be able to have this data to really aggressively go after some of these federal grants, to really ease some of the burden on some of the things that we're talking about. Because when you think about the requirements around some of these federal grants, they're very strenuous. Like, they need a lot of data to corroborate exactly what we're asking for, a lot of reporting back. So a lot of that is also human capital as well. And so it is something that we're thinking about. It is something that we're working in unison on. I know I've talked to Councilmember Watson about a lot of the initiatives that the city is trying to work with the IT department on the county level about, and she's had the opportunity to meet with our city IT department on some of the ideas that we're proposing to the county on other innovative ways that we can think about fixing or investing in our infrastructure with some of the other funding vehicles that are out there. The other thing that I wanted to mention, so that's some of the things that the city can do. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that I do meet with our state highway district 3 engineer. Erica was previously in that role. Now Derek Gunn is in that role. I do have a meeting with him on November 9th. And so I try to make sure that I stay updated, or that I'm amplifying, because I represent District 4.
Let's Talk About It is here to communicate, educate, motivate, uplift, and inspire people all over the world. See you next time. Let's talk about it.